so sick and tired of hearing about privilege. Privilege isn't being white, bonehead. Privilege is living in government housing and calling people oppressors while they pay your bills. Get it? I'm done pretending that any of this makes sense.
You were never a slave, and I was never a slave owner. We go out every day and we bust our ass because nothing is handed to us. And there will be nothing handed to us.
A lot of people hear white privilege and immediately think someone is saying white people never worked hard or never went through anything difficult in their life. That's not what that means. White privilege is not about individual pain. It's about the default treatment you receive before you do anything at all. They see who the system is quick to protect and who they're comfortable just throwing away. Y'all gotta understand something. A lot of people misunderstand white privilege because they're looking for something obvious. They're expecting it to look like money being handed out, or jobs just falling into their laps, or life just being easy across the board, right? And when they don't see that, then they just assume that the whole idea of white privilege is either fake or heavily exaggerated. But that's not how it actually works. White privilege usually does not show up as some obvious reward. Most of the time, it shows up in what you don't experience. It's the problems that never land on your radar in the first place. It's extra steps that you don't even realize other people are taking just to be treated normally. For example, just moving through public spaces, being in a store, walking through a neighborhood that you don't live in, being in a nice area at night.
That's mine. I have a receipt. That's mine.
That's not it, bro.
What you mean? How much you want to bet? Bet your job on it.
Show me.
Bet your job
Show
on
me
it.
show me the receipt.
Bet your security job on it. Stole it. You didn't steal it. You stole it. Okay. Yo. Your job is on the line. You know that, right?
Okay. And
give me my shit, nigga. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Well, I came into an auto zone, and this young lady decides that she wants to follow me around and says that I'm not allowed to bring my book bag into the store. A grown man unable to bring a book bag in the store.
For a lot of white people, none of that comes with extra thought. You're not scanning the room to see who's watching you. You're not changing how you walk, talk, or move around so you don't look suspicious. You're just allowed to exist. For black people, those calculations happen constantly. Not because we want them to, but because experience teaches you what can go wrong if you don't. And that difference matters because it affects how relaxed you are in the world. It affects how confident you feel. It affects how much mental energy you have to use just to get through normal situations.
Unwritten black commandment you sick and tired of following.
Code switching. I work for LADWP. And I'm a procurement agent there. So yeah, I have to code switch.
People would be like, oh, why are you mad? And it's literally just me not code switching and me not faking enthusiasm. Like, it's literally me just being calm and mellow. Like, not the fake, ha ha ha, the fake laughs after every sentence, the exclamation point.
And the same thing shows up in professional spaces too. White folks are usually assumed competent unless they give a reason not to be. Black folks feel like we gotta prove ourselves just to get neutral treatment. You walk in knowing that one mistake can confirm something that somebody was already thinking. So the margin for error is much smaller. And when mistakes happen, the response usually is not the same. When a white person messes up at work, it's more likely to be treated as a learning experience, right? Just a bad day, a temporary slip up. But when a black person messes up, a lot of times there's this unspoken weight on it. Like it says something deeper, you know? Like it confirms a story that somebody already had in their mind. And that difference doesn't always come from somebody being openly racist. A lot of times it's unconscious, but either way, the outcome is still the same. White people are less likely to be seen as suspicious just for being somewhere. You're less likely to be followed around a store like you're about to steal something. And they're less likely to be assumed unqualified before they even open their mouths. When they mess up, people are much quicker to call it a mistake, not a character flaw and not a reflection of their whole community. To people who don't experience this, it looks small, it's petty, it's not that deep, right? But when it happens over and over again, it starts to add up. Those assumptions decide who gets hired, who gets patience, and who gets grace. They decide who's allowed to learn on a job and who's expected to already be perfect coming in. And when you never have to think about any of that, it's real easy to convince yourself that it doesn't exist. One of the other things that people don't like to talk about is how differently other people are allowed to exist in this country. And I don't mean that in some abstract way. I'm talking about how daily actions are interpreted depending on who you are. White people are generally allowed to exist as individuals. What they do stays attached to them. If they mess up, it's their mistake. If they succeed, it's their win. The story starts and ends with that specific individual. But for most black people, it does not work that way. When something goes wrong involving a black person, it almost never stays isolated. It gets stretched and it gets generalized. One person's actions start to look like proof of something bigger. All of a sudden, it's not about what happened anymore. It's about what people think it means about all black people as a whole. And you see this play out in the media all the time. When a white person commits a violent act, the conversation immediately shifts to their mental health, their upbringing, or what they were dealing with in their past. There's an effort to explain the reasoning behind it, to kind of humanize it, you know?
A. Adam Lanza shot and killed 20 first graders and 6 educators. The report says he had profound mental, emotional, and developmental challenges.
He had a history of mental illness and had to become physically aggressive, throwing a chair and glass across the room.
Card was experiencing an acute mental health episode in the months before Wednesday's massacre.
But when a black person commits a crime, the framing changes. Now it's about crime stats, culture, neighborhood, and what's wrong with the black community.
How does 13% of the population commit 50% of the crimes?
Why do we always see the perpetrator being black?
Y'all gotta understand, none of this requires somebody to wake up and just decide to be racist. A lot of this is conditioning. It's how people have been taught to interpret behavior. And over time, those interpretations become automatic. And what makes it heavier is the pressure that creates. When you notice you're not being judged as yourself, you move differently. You gotta watch your tone. You gotta measure your reactions. You think twice before speaking. Not because you're fake, but because the consequences of being misunderstood are much higher. And that kind of self-monitoring is very exhausting. I personally stopped doing that a long time ago. I used to do it when I was younger, but at a certain point, I really just stopped caring. I'm gonna be honest. Like I said before, when white people mess up, there's usually some space to separate the action from the person, right? They get a lot of grace. But for black people, that separation usually doesn't exist. That action becomes your identity. And that's exactly why certain narratives stick so easily. It's easier to believe stereotypes when people are already being reduced to them. It's easier to justify unequal treatment when you can convince yourself that it's about groups, not individual behavior. It's also why black success can feel threatening to some people, because it challenges the ideas that negative outcomes are personal or cultural. Really think about that. It forces people to confront assumptions that they've been comfortable with. And instead of adjusting those assumptions, some people just push back. Being seen as an individual is a privilege. You gotta understand that. Not because it makes life perfect, but because it gives you grace, space to fail, space to grow, and space to exist without the judgment of an entire group on your shoulders. And when one group gets that space consistently while another group doesn't, the outcome is never random. It's predictable. This is one of those things that a lot of people don't notice until you really put it in front of their face, right? Because belonging is rarely said out loud. Nobody really wakes up and says, you don't belong here. Some people do if you got the balls to do it, but most people don't. It shows up in small stuff, like the looks, the questions, the assumptions, the hesitation. You know what I'm talking about. The way certain people get challenged in spaces that they're fully qualified to be in.
Imagine this. You're on a full flight from Istanbul, Turkey to San Francisco, and about 3 hours into the flight, they make an announcement asking for a doctor. They're like, if you're a doctor, if there's a doctor on board, please identify yourself. First thing the flight attendant says to you as he comes over, he's like, wait, are you a doctor? He looks at you kind of weird. You're like, yeah, I am. First, he asks again, you're sure you're a doctor? I'm like, yes, I am. And then I pulled out my phone and showed him my work ID, which clearly says my name, says medical doctor on it, or MD, and then says like doctor in huge letters at the bottom. I see that he's pretty reluctant, but he takes me back to where the flight attendants kind of gather, and I meet his colleague who also then questions me, are you a doctor? Well, what kind of doctor are you? And I'm explaining to her. Then finally I say, can we just go talk to the patient? What's happening? Mind you, when I'm interviewing the patient or talking to the patient and his mom, the flight attendant is jumping in each time, like telling me, no, I don't, this is what's going on, like interjecting and telling me her own plan, telling me how to ask questions to this specific patient, and I am taken aback. Tell me why I say, I think this kid needs this, And the flight attendant tells me, you know what? No, he doesn't. We'll just wait to see if XYZ happens again, and then we can choose to give it to him. Then I tell her, well, we're supposed to give it to him to prevent XYZ.
So that's what people mean when they say whiteness is treated as neutral. White people can walk in a lot of spaces and their presence doesn't need any explanation. Nobody's trying to figure out how they got there, and nobody's double checking to see if they actually belong in that space. But when black people walk in those same rooms, we're often seen as like an extra layer that got added. And it's not always aggressive. Sometimes it's very subtle. A little too much curiosity, a lot of surprise, a lot of questions, things that white people would not be getting asked. That's not a compliment. That's someone exposing what they really felt before you even opened your mouth. This isn't about black people not being capable. This is about a system that doesn't automatically assume that we are. So even when you're qualified, even when you did everything right, there's still this feeling like you're being assessed just for being there. And that's not insecurity. That's just recognizing patterns. When white people criticize institutions, it's usually framed as independent thinkers, truth tellers, or people just asking the hard questions. But when black people point out the unfair treatment, the response shifts real fast. Notice how the focus shifts off of what's being said to how it's being said. Now it's about tone, about emotion, about delivery. And just like that, the system becomes off limits. Labeling black people as complaining or playing victim is one of the easiest ways to dodge what's actually being called out. It turns a structural problem into a personal flaw. And once that label sticks, ignoring everything else becomes super easy. You don't have to look at the facts. You don't have to look at history. You just discredit the messenger and keep it moving. And that's how narrative control actually works. Not by necessarily proving somebody wrong, but by deciding who's allowed to speak in the first place. Another place white privilege shows up clearly is how racist behavior can be rewarded instead of punished. We've seen it over and over again. White people caught on camera being openly racist, dishing out threats and harassing people.
I am racist.
Idiot, for
And
real.
you are
You are an idiot. No,
I
I'm
am
not.
racist, and I'll say that to the whole entire world. Don't be disrespectful.
You ruined your life, by the way.
Oh, talking about
Bye.
you talking about respect? You talking about respect? You are fired from this place, mother. You're not gonna be working here.
Suck it.
Suck what? Look how you
Suck
fucking look
it.
like.
What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you, you ugly Get the out of my
The type of behavior that doesn't need any type of explaining. And instead of those moments ending with accountability, what usually comes next is a GoFundMe page. It's crazy, right? The story flips almost immediately. All of a sudden, the person that was being openly racist becomes the victim somehow. Now the focus is on how they lost their job or how their life is ruined. But it wouldn't have come to that point if they weren't being openly racist, right? And the harm that they've done just automatically fades to the background. And the support comes in fast too. It's tens of thousands of dollars that people will raise for these openly racist individuals.
You guys see this? They deadass have a GoFundMe for her and she already raised $41,000, almost 42. And ours is sitting at $20. Racist gets 41, the victim gets $20.
And it's not because they don't understand what's going on. It's either because they agree with it or they don't. And that type of response sends a clear message. Being openly racist isn't always treated like a real risk. In some cases, it's cushioned, it's excused, it's financially rewarded. There's always a safety net waiting on the other side. And that same safety net is not there for black people when we're affected by racism. There's no type of rush to fundraise for us for lost opportunities, public humiliation, whatever the case may be. The expectation is usually just take it and move on. And then when the excuses start flying like, oh, I was just having a bad day, that was just a bad moment, that's when it shows how selective empathy is for certain groups of people. Grace gets extended based on who people see themselves in. And that's exactly how privilege works here. Not by never facing consequences, but by being protected when you do. A lot of white people don't want to admit that white privilege exists, but it does. And whether they want to admit it or not, most white people have benefited from it at some point in their lives. I'm not saying that to demonize anyone, but it's the truth.